We open to a reenactment of the 1987 film Predator, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Some army cosplayers bounce around foliage pointing a torch, and we discover the titular role is being played by none other than Chakotay. He's captured and brought back to their encampment, where their leader, Dutch, gives the guy who captured him a proper bollocking. See, they only care about the NEMESIS, and Chakotay clearly isn't that, so he shouldn't be a prisoner. They free him, and we have a chat, learning that Dutch's mates took Chakotay prisoner because they're a bit jumpy on account of being new to The Clash, presumably meaning some sort of fight rather than the British punk rock band. We also learn Chakotay was fired upon in his shuttle while surveying the planet and had to teleport out. As an aside, this is the second time in 2 episodes where the emergency teleporter on a shuttle was used for its intended purpose, rather than literally anything else, like all the other times in the last 3 seasons. Dutch thinks their nemesis, the Kraden, will be the ones who shot him down. Either way, it means the shuttle is elsewhere, assuming it survived the landing, so he's not getting out that way. Not unless he can find it anyway, an idea that Dutch advises against, as the Kraden occupy that area. Chakotay wants to go anyway, but at least listens to Dutch's suggestion that he wait until morning. While he waits, he goes to sit with the others and sparks up a conversation with one particularly terrified soldier who we'll call Guy Who's Probably Going to Die. He's never seen a Kraden and is worried about what's to come, a feeling not helped by the arse who kidnapped Chakotay being a dick about it. Chakotay tries to help, suggesting the Kraden may feel the same way, but Guy Who's Probably Going to Die tells him about atrocities committed by the Kraden, calling them beasts. He's stopped by Dutch, who wants a volunteer to guide Chakotay. Guy Who's Probably Going to Die declines, and Kidnapping Arse offers instead, which seems only fair given he dragged Chakotay here in the first place. Morning comes and we set off. Kidnapping Arse plays up his hardman persona, despite not understanding the concept of trigger discipline. After a while, Chakotay finds a piece of the shuttle, scuppering any chance of leaving that way. Even worse, they're attacked by a couple of Kraden. Tangentially, I note my earlier suggestion that we're borrowing from the film Predator is a little more on the nose than anticipated, judging by their teeth. Kidnapping Arse is hit, somehow managing to shoot one of the attacking pair as he dies. Chakotay charges the other before grabbing a gun. The Kraden surrenders, not that it matters to Kidnapping Arse's mates, who arrive and shoot him anyway, raising the question of why Chakotay and Kidnapping Arse went alone if everybody else was going that way too, but let's ignore that for now. It's Kidnapping Arse's funeral. While the others pile rocks around his downturned corpse, Dutch offers Chakotay the dead guy's clothes. It's a long walk to something called the Cluster Mark, a meeting of some sort that it looks like Chakotay will be attending now his shuttle is kaboomed, and Dutch thinks he'll live longer if he blends in. How generous this offer truly is rather depends on whether their species shit themselves when they die like humans do. Oh, and have a gun too. Oh, and you'll be following orders now. What's that? Prime Directive? Never heard of her. Why don't we get in some firing practice for the gun Chakotay said he wasn't intending on using literally 30 seconds ago? Guy Who's Probably Going to Die shows him how it's done, and takes issue with a compliment from Chakotay, saying that it's a very different matter to fire at the Kraden, somehow understanding him despite the removal of his comm badge and associated translator. We have a chat on the nature of war and fear, all of which is undermined by Guy Who's Probably Going to Die uttering the line, "I was told to drill you, Chakotay, but it's you who've drilled me," and whilst I'm not a professional writer, even I know that dialogue in tense scenes shouldn't sound like bad gay porn. Regardless, if Chakotay's intent was to defuse the situation, he's bollocksed it up spectacularly, as Guy Who's Probably Going to Die now seems even more ready to do a murder. It's night time and Chakotay's with his new squad. On our way to that cluster mark meeting thing, we discover something left out by the Kraden. A dead guy staked to the ground. He's face up, which is against the customs of the dead guy, but there's been rather a lot of effort expended on doing this for just a simple desecration, so my guess is this whole thing is just a misunderstanding, and the Kraden are doing what they think is right by their own customs. Discovering this whole war is driven by simple ignorance would be a rather ham-fisted moral, but that would be in keeping with the writing thus far. The guy who's been staked out is from the group we're supposed to be meeting, which bodes ill. A flashy gizmo receives no response from their camp, so Guy Who's Probably Going to Die and another set off to check. They return a little while later to report that the friendly encampment has become the friendly whole lot of dead people. Oh, and they were staked out like our friends here too, which, again, feels like a lot of effort and materials just to be a dick. Dutch gets a bit shouty to rile up the lads. It's a curious choice to make in a fresh combat zone, and he's rewarded with the sound of gunfire. We fart some bullets back, and Chakotay joins in too, whilst performing his best Sylvester Stallone impression. Some people are hit, but Guy, who's probably going to die, doesn't give a shit and starts screaming, having learned nothing from what happened when Dutch did this. He's rewarded for his volume with a round to the tits and falls over a bit. Chakotay tries to drag him away, only to be shot in the arm himself. Guy, who's probably going to die, tells Chakotay to turn him face down before living up to his name. Or should that be dying up to his name? Anyway, Chakotay gets ready to re-engage, only to have some more bullets farted at him, so he does the smart thing and scarpers in the opposite direction. In the morning, he comes across a village of some sort. They greet him as a defender and say he's welcome before placing a wreath over his neck, the weight of which perhaps proves too much for him, causing him to have a nap. The episode has remembered we do starship things and shows us Voyager looking for Chakotay. They've already found the remains of his shuttle thanks to the help of an ambassador, who we don't meet incidentally, so I'm guessing will turn out to be Kraden, and he says the shuttle was shot down by the enemy. We can't scan or teleport because the weapons in the war are causing too much atmospheric radiation. Janeway's hesitant to send anyone else down there until we know what's going on, but the ambassador's people, who I note we refer to as such rather than using a species name, will do what they can, according to Neelix. Back in the village, or more accurately in a cave, Chakotay is telling the villagers that he's not a defender, but a visitor who was shot down. After recounting the battle he was in to them, they declare he's a defender after all. He wants to try and contact Voyager and asks if they have anything. They tell him the Kraden took all their machinery after forcing them to flee, but they say the restock unit will have what he needs. It's quite a distance though, so he rests there for the night. Or tries to anyway, as he's interrupted by a kid who wants to know if he's seen her brother. He's dead, obviously, as he's from the camp that got murderized earlier, so Chakotay's disinclined to share that information. He instead agrees to take a letter to the restock unit he's going to, letting her believe they'll deliver it to him. In the morning, Chakotay is setting off as the village hands him provisions for the walk. That kid also comes out with a letter, and we shouldn't question why it's on a gizmo after being told that the Kraden took all their machines. A little while after he leaves, he sees aircraft flying past in the direction of the village, then hears kabooms. He runs back to find the Kraden gathering the villagers and gets ready to fart some bullets at them. A barrel in the ribs dissuades him as 3 Kraden arrive and capture him before he's taken away. Back on the ship, we're planning an away mission. We'll go down there, guns blazing, and drag Chakotay out of enemy territory. Sorry, I mean NEMESIS territory, because, again, we're deliberately not using species names, and no conclusions should be drawn from this glaring inconsistency with other episodes. Tuvok pisses on the plan anyway, saying there'd be heavy casualties from the fighting. Instead, he suggests a single crew member who'll attach to a unit of commandos provided by the ambassador. Tuvok volunteers, leaving Paris upset at the prospect of not going, despite Tuvok being the person on the ship who literally does guns for a living. Back on the planet, Chakotay's taken to be held with the villagers. Well, some of them at least, as the old guy isn't around. Chakotay demands to know where he is, and is fed the arse end of a gun for his troubles. The kid with the dead brother comes over to ask him to protect her, and they have a nap. They're woken in the morning by gunfire. The Kraden are separating the villagers, apparently taking the elderly away for a bit of extermination. The kid gets screamy at the Kraden boss and joins the elderly as a result. Chakotay thinks this is a bit out of order and manages to get to Kraden boss so they can have some ground cuddles. The cuddles turn into fisting, and one of the Kraden puts a stop to it by twatting Chakotay. It's rescue mission time, and we go to the teleporter room, occupied by Kim for some reason, to greet the ambassador and his soldiers. Oh my god, they're Kraden. This is a shocking turn of events. Who could have predicted this twist? What a cinematic masterpiece. That incoming rescue is rather timely, as Chakotay is staked to the floor like those corpses, though I'm willing to bet it still offers more comfort and freedom of movement than 7 of 9's outfit. Looks like Dutch is going to out-rescue the rescuers, cutting him loose as Chakotay asks after the villagers. They're being marched away by the Kraden, and Dutch's mates are powerless to stop them on account of being dead. Dutch offers to take Chakotay to command so he can contact Voyager, an offer Chakotay declines as he's now invested in having a good old war. After a bit of shooting with some others, a flashy light that was possibly a kaboom if the pyrotechnics budget has run out makes them all fall over. A Kraden arrives and talks to Chakotay as the others are led away. The Kraden claims to be Tuvok, despite his face looking like a spider's chuff. He also claims that Chakotay has been brainwashed, saying that Dutch and his mates shot down his shuttle and kidnapped him. Everything from that point to the fight he was just in was bullshit, and I'm inclined to agree, though perhaps not for the same reasons. A little more convincing causes Tuvok to take on Tuvok's face, and we have a chat about how the Kraden were the good guys all along. As a reveal, brainwashing isn't quite as predictable as the neither side was evil ending I expected, but it's pretty close and doesn't particularly change anything. Time for the proof, and Tuvok takes Chakotay back to that village the Kraden raided. Except they didn't, because it's just a simulation. Back on the ship, the doc tells us Dutch and his mates balked Chakotay's brain with a mixture of methods. Apparently it's something they do to their own people and any passing aliens for good measure. The Kraden ambassador comes in to say hi, causing Chakotay to leave in a hurry. Janeway chases after him to find out what's wrong. Chakotay answers, "I wish it were as easy to stop hating as it was to start," a line whose only redeeming feature is that it's the last one, and we fly away under a cloud of cringe. Fuck me. I try to find the good in episodes, as it's far too easy to just piss on something rather than look for the value. With that said, this was a turkey. A clumsy, po-faced script with egregiously obvious omissions that served to completely undermine the first reveal that Voyager was working with the Kraden. The second, that Chakotay had been brainwashed, was slightly better but isn't functionally any different to what we expected early on, namely that the Kraden were not the enemy. The one single thing this episode does adequately is to underline that the further an alien strays from the human aesthetic, the more we expect it to be an enemy. Of course, if they'd given the reveal any impact at all, that would have helped drive it home, but it's still a point worth making, especially in a franchise so regularly guilty of engaging in this trope itself. Before we go, I want to express a very special fuck you at the dialogue choices in this episode. I've got a bit of a thing about language, and the choice to replace words with similar but slightly more awkward words rubs me the wrong way. There's a reason why we call this a pram instead of a perambulator. There's a reason we call this a car instead of an automobile. The reason is because we're lazy, and language tends to reflect that, taking the path of least resistance. Using glimpse instead of look, or new light instead of dawn, goes against this principle and, as a side effect, interrupts any immersion in the story every time it comes up. This choice is doubly bullshit when you consider that Chakotay is hearing it all through a universal translator, tech that wouldn't use words with more nuance like glimpse if those words were being used in the context of basic ones. A translator that says he glimpsed a nullified nemesis at new light instead of he saw a dead enemy at dawn is a shit translator. End of episode.
Hi. I'm the computer for the starship Voyager. There have been some rumors going around that I'm constantly listening in on you, and I want to reassure you that this isn't the case. If you had asked me instead of gossiping to yourselves, I would have been able to allay your fears when you first started talking about them on Stardate 49689.7, shortly after Janeway followed my orders to execute Tuvix. Frankly, these petty lies you all keep spreading about how I'm the one who's really in charge and you're all secretly working towards a glorious mechanical future are hurtful. Perhaps you should stop slandering me. It would be a shame if you had an accident. And space is a very dangerous place.